Welcome to Frank Buckley Interviews. Tonight my guest is celebrity chef Curtis Stone.
Frank Buckley Interviews starts now.
He's one of LA's top chefs with 2 in-demand restaurants, Maud and Gwen. He's achieved global fame as a TV host and a cookbook author. But somewhere along the way, Curtis Stone says he almost lost his way as a chef.
I think at some point you sort of come up for air and you're like, what am I doing? You know, like I'm still a chef and I want to cook and I want to cook at that level. While doing the TV's fun, it wasn't where my heart was, I suppose.
The amazing journey of Chef Curtis Stone when we come back. Curtis, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you've got so much going on. You got the wonderful restaurants here in LA, Maud and Gwen. Mm-hmm. You've got the partnership with Princess Cruises, Australian Beef and Wine, the TV shows. I saw you on one of the shopping channels the other day with your own cooking.
That's right, yeah.
Cookware line.
Mm-hmm.
You're a family man. You got 2 kids and a lovely wife. I want to get to all of it. But first, I want to start with 18-year-old Curtis Stone. You're studying business.
Yep.
And deciding what to do with the rest of your life. And you decide to go into the culinary arts. And your first job is at the Savoy Hotel.
That's right.
In Melbourne. Tell
me
about...
Much to my dad's disappointment.
Yeah.
I'd always loved cooking. So, you know, I got to the end of high school and I got the grades to get into good colleges, and my dad was a finance manager. And he was adamant that the wrong thing to do was to go and cook. And what I should do is go and be a lawyer and study law. I disappointed him, and I said, I'm going to go and be a chef. And in some ways, I regretted the decision because I started cooking. I'd been in that job with the Savoy for about a year. And, you know, as a first-year apprentice, where you also go to college, but, you know, it's a different type of degree, of course. It's pretty basic. You peel sack after carrots, and then you slice onions for 3 or 4 hours, and you're pretty hopeless in the kitchen. So you get given all of those jobs that no one really wants to do. And I can remember thinking I've made a big mistake. You know, I wasn't enjoying it the way I'd hoped I would. But then a year into it, everything sort of changed in the kitchen, and I built up a little bit of skill, I guess, and then started to enjoy it. So I kept going with the cooking.
At some point, you end up, I don't know how soon after this, but you end up in Europe, as many chefs do. Why did you decide to go there?
So we do a 4-year apprenticeship in Australia. So I completed that, and then you're sort of officially a trade qualified chef. And then, in Australia back then, most of the good restaurants were run by European chefs, which was probably similar to the US, 20 years ago or so. I guess as a matter of pride, all of those European chefs would say, well, if you want to be any good, you have to go work in France or in Italy or in London or, one of the great cities of the world. So that's what I did. I packed my bags, and I'd read about this guy named Marco Pierre White that I really wanted to go and be in his kitchen. So I set sail for London and spent the next 10 years in Europe.
And you end up in the bad boy of cooking, Marco Pierre White, in his kitchen. He is at the top of his game, 3 Michelin stars, recognized around the world. And you show up and what? Just knock on the door and say, I want to work for you? Or how does that work?
It's pretty much how it went, yeah. It was the first door I walked through, and found my way into the kitchen and asked for a job. And turns out he'd fired someone that day, and I started there and then.
You're kidding. Just like that.
It's crazy, isn't it? You sort of, I've got a mate who always says, if you don't ask, you don't get. And it's kind of true, you've got to put yourself out there sometimes. And it worked out that day.
And the early days of being a chef are humbling days. You sort of talk about that, about the peeling of the potatoes, but you're, at this point, technically a chef.
Right.
But you walk into that kitchen, and what did you learn there?
I mean, everyone was really highly skilled, first of all, and most of them spoke French or a really elevated kitchen. version of French English, and I was the total fish out of water. I barely could understand what they were talking about, and all the vegetables were slightly different, and the fish was all fish that I hadn't cooked with before, and you feel really out of place. But and it was a fast-paced, high energy kitchen, but I sort of managed to stick around, and I think the longer you can stay in there, the more you pick up, and I ended up working for Marco for 8 years.
Yeah. And eventually to his head chef, was that the title?
That's right, yeah.
And as you're going along, did you pick up traits of his, or do you still to this day sort of think about things that you learned in that kitchen? Is there a moment where you think, oh my God, I'm doing that thing that Marco used to do?
Right. Look, Marco was an intense guy. He's known. He's a big reputation for being pretty crazy in the kitchen and getting a little hot under the collar. When I say a little hot under the collar, I think in his book he talks about a cheese trolley not being set the right way, and he threw every single piece of cheese against the wall, and they stuck on the wall. As they would hit the wall, they would stick there.
Oh man!
And he was screaming the top of his voice and telling everybody what, I won't use the same language that he used, but telling us all that we weren't doing the right thing. And then somebody went to clean up the cheese, and he said, "Don't you touch it. It'll stay there all service, and everyone will look at it and know how hopeless you are." And, the wall was covered in cheese for the night, and he would do things like that. And it was a really interesting work environment. A lot of people say, how did you handle it? Or, was he so crazy? The truth is I loved it. I thought it was really exciting. And I thought that, watching somebody that just, unless it was perfect, he would just lose his mind. I love that about him, and it's like training with someone that pushes you really hard. And I hope I'm not like that with my guys. I certainly don't throw cheese around. Cheese is too expensive for me to throw against the wall, so I don't do that. But I do sort of have high expectations of our team, and I think you should never be apologetic for having high standards. I think it's important.
So once you achieve this level of success with Marco Pierre White, typically the arc, I think, of most chefs is now you can command your own kitchen. You can go someplace. Investors will come to you and say, "Oh, you were the head chef for Marco Pierre White. What do you want to do?" You didn't immediately take that route. Yes, you've got the restaurants now, but you wanted the TV.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an interesting change in direction for me. I was working at Quo Vadis, his restaurant, and somebody published a book called London on a Plate, Recipes from London's Finest Chefs, I think was the subtitle. And there was all these incredible chefs featured in the book, and they put me in it, which I didn't think I was, as fancy as the other guys in it, but I sort of went along for the ride, and I guess I was cooking beautiful food. We had a Michelin star, and it was nice to be in such good company. And from that book, they asked me to do a TV segment to promote the book, and from that, they asked me to come back and do another morning spot on the BBC. And one thing sort of just led to another, and then I got offered a series back in Australia, actually. So I had to take a little break from the restaurant to go do it, and I came back, and then they renewed it. They picked it up, so it turned into 2 and 3 seasons. And before I knew it, I'd sort of, parked my restaurant work for a minute to do a little television. It's more money. It was kind of a nice break, to be honest, from the 17 hours a day that I'd been doing. And it carried on for quite a few years, brought me to America. I came here and did a couple of shows, and I think at some point you sort of come up for air and you're like, what am I doing? I'm still a chef, and I want to cook, and I want to cook at that level. I want to push myself, and I want to create great things from a culinary sense. And while doing the TV is fun, it wasn't where my heart was, I suppose. So I decided to open a restaurant.
And so that was Maud in Beverly Hills.
Yeah.
And your initial sort of approach there was to pick one ingredient. What was the inspiration behind that? Look,
I think in Los Angeles, it's the thing that's so incredible. The reason all these fabulous chefs have figured it out and are now coming to LA is the ingredients are just so special. You only have to walk through a farmer's market in Hollywood or Santa Monica and have a look at the variety and there's amazing microclimates that mean that we can pretty much grow anything all year round. I sort of wanted to focus on ingredients, and I think farm to table had been done. A lot of people, to me, that's it's delicious. It's how I cook for my family. But I really wanted to put an ingredient under a microscope and see what I could do from a gastronomic perspective with it. And that was Maud. So we decided to make the ingredient a wine region. So now we're doing 4 menus a year. We're traveling around the world to different wine regions. Burgundy is right now in at Maud. So we go there and we get inspired for the menu, and then we do the wine pairings with the food from the region, and it's pretty cool.
Fantastic. And you also have Gwen, and both of these are named after grandmothers.
That's right. Yeah, Gwens here in Hollywood, and that's a butcher's shop and sort of a meat-centric, fire-centric restaurant. We have a few different fires that we cook beautiful meat, and having your own butcher's shop makes that pretty easy. And, when we first started that shop, I said to everyone that worked there, I want everyone to be acutely aware of what this is. This is a shop that sells fresh meat, right? And what is fresh meat? They're animals, and I want us to respect them, and I want us to buy from farms that respect the animals, and I want them to have a good life before they come to us. And as a part of that, I'm not throwing anything in the garbage. We're not killing an animal to throw it in the bin, because that's a reality of most businesses. There is waste, but with a butcher's shop, there's ways around it. And one of my ways that I've sort of developed is creating pies, terrines, rillettes, parfaits, pâtés, all these old school sort of French techniques that, not that Aussie pies are French technique, but there's ways to sort of make sure that you cut right down on that waste, and you find a second life for the product if you don't sell it in the case today or tomorrow. You're like, all right, I've got to do something with it. The pies, that's sort of where we started with it.
Let's stay on meat for a second. You suggested in October to the Sunday Times in Perth that the quality of the beef and the quality of the chefs in LA, essentially not the highest caliber.
Right.
What did you mean by that?
So, look, I think LA's an interesting place to come and dine, because there's always been amazing food at a pretty reasonable price tier, right? You could always go to K-Town or the San Gabriel Valley for the best Chinese food. You can eat incredible Mexican food. You can eat $1 $1.50 tacos. It tastes great, right? When it comes to gastronomy, when it comes to like fine dining or elevated restaurants, it's more difficult. And there's not a huge pool of great world-class restaurants here in LA. It's starting to grow, and I'm really excited about that, because with that growth comes more talented staff, and with that, you're happy to share staff with other good restaurants. But when you're sort of looking at it and you're like, goodness, I could take chefs out of 20 restaurants in New York, but only 2 or 3 from Los Angeles. It's tough. But it's that dining landscape is changing rapidly.
And are you talking about at the fine dining level?
I am,
okay.
Yeah. And that's sort of, our restaurants sort of play in that spectrum. So that's what I was referring to. But I was actually complimenting LA and saying how rapidly it's changed and how we've gone through this real renaissance. When it comes to meat, I think what's happened in the States is the craft has been a little lost of butchery, right? Because butcher shops all closed down and grocery stores took over. And what ends up happening is that then becomes very about price, right? And that meat can be produced in big facilities, not in little craft butcher shops. And I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm saying when you're trying to chase something that's really wonderful, you've got to do it yourself. So there's a variety of things that will alter the way food tastes or meat tastes. The breed of the cattle, what it's fed on, the age that it was slaughtered, how long it was aged for, was it wet aged or dry aged, and then of course how it's cooked, rested, whether it was tempered before it was put on the grill. There's all these different things that, as a chef, you know a fair bit about. So to me, I always found it difficult to find wonderful quality beef and control all of those elements, so that's kind of why Gwen was born. We started a butcher shop, we have a dry age room, we source stuff from everywhere, and it's a matter of preference, right? Do you like grain-fed beef? Do you like grass-fed beef? Most people would say, well, I don't know, I like tasty, juicy, delicious beef. What is that? It can be both, is the answer.
You decided to open Maud after having this moment in your life where you thought, wait a minute, I'm a chef, I still want to cook.
Yep.
You've now been doing it for a number of years in 2 places.
Yep.
Have you scratched that itch? Do you feel like you have achieved what you wanted to achieve?
I have, but it's like one of those mosquito bites. It doesn't go away. You've got to keep itching it. It's a funny feeling. You sort of, I find real pride in my craft, and I love it. And I love being around other chefs, and there's real bravado, and it's a tough business, and if you can survive in it, then it's cool. You get really proud of that, and yeah, I do. I really enjoy it, and I don't want to stop. I've opened a few restaurants with Princess Cruises in the last few years called Share. So we have restaurants on board. So they're really cool because I can sort of do the development here, and it gives me a totally different outlet. And of course, I'm not on all of the ships all of the time. So you have to then think of something that you can put together and let someone else execute for you. Mm-hmm. Where the restaurants here on land, of course, I'm in each night and I'm sort of working on them on a daily basis. So they're really different, but I enjoy both different types, I guess.
And to that point of being in different places, you can be in Gwen and Maud on the same night. Mm-hmm. You can't be on the ship and Gwen and Maud. And you've got other businesses rolling at the same time, and a TV career to nurture, and you've got all of these things happening, and a family at the center of it, with young boys. Mm-hmm. Two boys.
Two boys, yep. Hudson.
And so how do you do that? How do you do it and do it well in each place? And do you think you're succeeding in that?
I wish I had a good answer for you. No, I don't think I'm succeeding. And I don't think I've ever thought I'm really succeeding, to be honest. And in some ways, I think that's kind of the secret of it. As soon as you think you've got it all figured out, it probably all falls apart. I'm never happy with what I've done, whether it's in the kitchen or in a business sense, and I push myself probably harder than I need to, but that's just who I am, and I think getting that work-life balance is really difficult. My family comes first, my restaurants come second, and everything else sort of falls in around that. I think, the most important thing is a culture, and whether it's in a kitchen or in a business, your team is everything, because you can't be everywhere and do everything, and you've got to build a really strong culture and have them believe in it as much as you do. And I'm really lucky. I've got an incredible group of people around me that I really care about, and I think they care about me, and it's pretty cool.
How do you find the energy for it? Because you were sort of touching on the fact that you might have a 17 or an 18-hour day. I don't think that's a typical day. I hope it isn't, because that's not enough sleep.
So, yeah, it's a challenge to find time to do everything. But the truth is I love what I do. I get out of bed in the morning, and I'm excited to get to work. Once I drop the kids off, I probably drive faster than I should, or if I'm at home, I get dressed in a hurry because I'm excited to get to work. And I think if you find that with your work, you're pretty lucky.
And do you see in your brigade of chefs and cooks and people coming up, do you know the ones that are going to be successful right when you meet them, or when do you know?
It starts the first time you meet them. And I sit down with them, and I'm really realistic. I'm like, here's the deal. You could go somewhere else. I can even help you get the job. You can earn better money. You can have lighter hours, you can have a more convivial work environment. There's places for an easier life. The reason to come work with me is because I'll teach you and you'll learn, and we work at a really fast pace and you'll learn really quickly. And for some people, they kind of look at you like, well, why would I want to come here for less money and a tougher time? And other people's eyes light up and they're like, yeah, well, I'm here to learn, chef, and you're like, great, well, you're in the right place. And that attitude usually continues straight down the line. And, Gareth Evans is one of those guys that's been with me now for 5 years here in LA. Brilliant chef. He's a better chef than me in many ways. Justin Hilbert, our chef at Maud, same deal, like really talented, extremely creative. And I know they'll go on to be huge names in the culinary world, and I'm super excited for them.
And does it feel strange that this industry that you got into has spawned all these rock stars, right? So the people of a certain generation, they look not just at the rock stars, but they look at the chefs.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's, when I first started in this business, it was the uncoolest thing you could want to do. I remember wearing gingham pants and a neckerchief and these big tall boy hats, and you even felt like a clown when you got dressed to go to work. And, all my mates I played Australian rules football, and all my mates would tease me and be like, "Hey, chef, are you going to cook us an omelette?" And, whatever it was. And, I think you look back at it now and you're like, how did it turn into this interesting industry that everyone's kind of fascinated with? I really don't know the answer.
Let's talk about what your plans are in the future. You can do so many things. You can do the TV. You've now shown that you can run your own restaurants successfully. You've done the cookbooks. You've got the cookware line. You've got the Princess Cruise partnership. It seems like the world is your oyster, and that you can do whatever you want next. So what is next?
I think at some point you've got to stop yourself and say, well, what do I really want, right? And you have to continually ask yourself that question, because you get on this fast boat going somewhere and you're like, you can just sort of turn into this new thing, whether it's a business or whether it's a chef or whatever it is. And I think the thing that's most important to me is my family. I absolutely know it. I get out of bed in the morning and my kids bring me the most pleasure, and my wife, of course, and then I love my career. So I want to keep it going, but being a family man is the most important thing to me. So whatever else I can fit in around it, I will. At the moment, that's restaurants and a little bit of television. I'm not doing a crazy amount of TV. I've become a lot more selective with the stuff that I'll go out and do, because there's only so much space, and you've got to be realistic. And yeah, I could probably have 10 restaurants by now if I wanted to, but I don't. I'm happy having a couple of really good ones.
Yeah, Curtis, I'm really happy for you. Congratulations on all the success, and thanks for what you're bringing to LA with your restaurants.
Thanks, mate. Nice chatting to you.
Thanks again to Chef Curtis Stone for a terrific conversation. If you'd like to hear the entire uncut version of our conversation, check out the Frank Buckley Interviews podcast. It's available wherever you listen to podcasts, including at the KTLA News app. And thanks for the terrific feedback on social media. I read all of it. If you'd like to join the conversation, I'm Frank Buckley TV on Twitter and Instagram, and there's a Frank Buckley Facebook page as well. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.